Finally, I've been using my new base model M2 MacBook Air for a week now and I'm ready to share my personal experience with you. What are the pros and cons I encountered? Can the M2 chip really be considered a new generation? And should you get yourself a brand new MacBook Air, considering just one NAND chip and throttling? I'm excited, hope you're excited too, and let's get into the video. Okay, let's place it safe over here because it's expensive. Like I said, this is the base model, so 8GB unified memory, 256GB SSD, and of course the new Apple M2 with 8-core CPU, 8-core GPU, and 16-core neural engine on board. And of course, I will tell you everything about its performance in detail, but I would like to kick it off with its appearance because colors does matter. My guy, as you probably already noticed, is in space gray, which is a classic MacBook finish. In the new line, however, we were presented with two new colors, Midnight and Starlight, and I would strongly discourage you from getting both Space Gray and Midnight if you want to preserve the original appearance of your MacBook. According to many reports online, aka people on the internet, MacBooks in the color Midnight constantly get smeared with your fingerprints, but also keep in mind that the USB Type-C ports get scratched over time and it looks, to put it mildly, not very good. So it will be more difficult to keep the original look of the MacBook. It's only been a week for me, so the ports still look brand new. Almost, but I'm confident that in 6 months to a year there will be major scratches next to the ports. So at this stage, I recommend you go for the timeless classic silver. The screen has become larger and it's immediately noticeable, 13.6 inches instead of 13, plus a notch at the top of the screen. There is no distinguishing air marking on the bottom, and the keyboard in this model is exactly the same as on the Pro 14 and 16-inch models. Typing becomes more convenient solely because of the thickness of its body, although I prefer the previous shape more. Even though it's really thin, I still find myself changing the position of my wrist because this sharp edge doesn't feel comfortable. But it's just me. This time Apple got rid of the visible speakers. They're now not next to the keyboard, but between the case and the display. And without further ado, here's an audio test of M2 MacBook Air, an M1 and 16-inch M1 Pro. You can hear it for yourself, but in case you're still wondering, the sound on the new model has more bass and is more well-rounded. The speakers don't sound like a 14 or 16-inch MacBook Pro, but I like it. Watching movies or videos on YouTube has become more enjoyable. A MagSafe port makes an appearance in place of one USB Type-C port, which is cool, but at the same time there is no card reader, HDMI, and so on. Although, on the other hand, do we really need them on the Air model? Perhaps, but let me give you my 2 cents on the new display first, and this is quite a disappointment in comparison with its 14 and 16-inch brothers that have a notch. If you don't take them into account and forget about their existence, then it's just a regular display, the same 60Hz, 100 nits brighter compared to the previous Air generation. In short, the most ordinary Apple display. It's true though that Apple's displays are some of the best, if not the best, that I've seen in my life. So yes, its specs have been limited by a little, but at the same time the screen does not suffer from this. It's still a great display. When editing a video, when retouching photos or watching movies, my eyes don't get tired or ache in any way. However, when I switched from a 16-inch Pro screen, it felt a little off at first. This is because on the 16-inch MacBook Pro, the screen has 120Hz, and after using it, the eyes really have to readjust. But if you switch to this Mac and never get your hands on the 120Hz MacBook, then you won't know the troubles. First world problem. But the same can be said about the previous Air models, so I see no reason to praise or scold Apple for that. They changed the form factor and that's nice, at least something new. But there is a notch above the screen now and a new webcam. What do you say about that? But first, let's talk about security. Check this out. Quite recently, I found my login credentials on the dark web. So my email leaked, my password leaked. Luckily, I can take control of this situation and instantly fix this. I know this because of today's sponsor, Aura. It's the app I use to protect my data from hackers, scammers, and spammers. And what are you doing to protect yourself? If the answer is nothing, then I highly recommend you try Aura. Here is how it works. Aura continuously monitors the dark web looking for your emails, passwords, and social security numbers and sends alerts fast to your phone or email when they find anything. Aura also gives you near real-time alerts on suspicious credit inquiries, like if someone was opening a loan or credit card in your name. They automatically send requests on your behalf to data brokers to remove your information, helping to reduce the amount of spam and robocalls you receive. Their VPN allows you to stay anonymous online by keeping your browsing history and personal information safe and encrypted. And their antivirus software that will block malware and viruses before they infect your devices. Identity theft is so common that there is a new victim every 14 seconds. It cost the average victim over $1,000. That means since I started talking about Aura, 5 people have had their identity stolen. Protect your family and yourself from identity theft at aura.com/ArthurWeiner, also linked below in the description. And if you sign up right now, Aura will give you a 2-week free trial with my link, so you can see for yourself how many times Aura finds you or your family members' personal info on the dark web. And if you sign up, let me know in the comments below if your personal information has been compromised. You won't regret checking. The webcam, to be honest, well, see for yourself. 1080p instead of 720p in the last MacBook. In short, not good until we turn the lights up. With regular lighting, the image is looking better, and you can also appreciate the sound quality now because, in case you haven't noticed, which would be strange, I'm recording the sound for this segment on the M2 MacBook Air. The pretty decent sound quality is recorded on the built-in microphone, or rather microphones, because there are now several of them. And to summarize, during numerous online meetings, video calls with relatives, no one complimented me on the new cool 1080p webcam in the new laptop. At least I know that it has improved, and it's nice to know that the webcam is better than before. But Tim, where's the Face ID? Why do we have to deal with this stupid notch if it doesn't even help unlock the screen? What am I, a prehistoric human to use my finger? Although Touch ID works great if you ask me. In summary, visually, the MacBook looks renovated. It's lighter, it's thinner, which is always great. But what's inside? What about the 1 NAND chip in the base model? And what about throttling? So now, let's get to the point. To my great disappointment, the power of the M2 is in theory enough to connect 2 to 3 external monitors. In practice, no. Only 1 monitor is available for connection still, which is not bad if you work with an open laptop and the external display is used as a second monitor. However, if you're a fan of the clamshell mode, when the Mac is kept close next to the monitor, alas, 1 monitor is often not enough and you have to put up with this limitation. And if it's not your first day on the web, you would have most likely heard that the M2 MacBook Pro has a problem associated with the NAND chip, or more precisely, in the base configuration where the SSD is only 250 GB. There's only 1 NAND chip, while as it used to be 2. At 512, there are 2 NAND chips, which affects the speed of this very SSD. And before, I believe that the issue wasn't so critical, it's just that it's Apple and any downfalls or flaws are always brought to the front pages. But no, the 1 NAND chip in the M2 Air base model really makes a difference in speed, especially the speed of a MacBook with only 8 gigs of unified memory. Look, when the RAM runs out, the laptop starts to work with the swap memory so that the computer continues to work efficiently. That is, 8 gigs of unified memory does not mean that it's your limit. Often, thanks to swap, this limit is increased to 10 to 12 gigabytes or even more. And it works flawlessly on the M1 models. However, in the base model of the M2, the speed of the SSD is considerably lower, and these are not just numbers and benchmarks. It really took longer to drop files. And if the MacBook also accepts the swap memory, then the laptop slows down down more apparently than it would with the M1. So what is the way out of this situation? Unfortunately, one way is not to get a Mac with a 250GB SSD. And most interestingly, Apple is not to blame for this oversight. The market has stopped producing 128GB NAND chips, and most likely because of this, the M1 Macs that are still in production will eventually also have only one NAND chip, affecting their performance. So to quote myself, Macs with 250GB SSDs should disappear from the face of the earth. At the moment, there is not a single piece of information on the Apple website about this drawback on the base model. And if it weren't for the reviews and impressions online, people would not have known about this before buying. But either way, here are the speed tests where you can clearly see that the SSD has become slower. This was especially noticeable when I had to transfer large files. Let's say 86GB were copied from an external drive in 3 minutes and 10 seconds, and it seems pretty fast. Until I tell you that this is the result of the M1 Air. M2 copied the same files in 7 minutes and 20 seconds. This is over a 2 times drop in performance speed. Is it noticeable in real life? Especially when multitasking. Let's take the export in Lightroom for example. While the M1 exports everything quite swiftly, the M2 Air barely accelerates and displays photos in a miserable way, and the mouse may start to lag. And here we can again run into the familiar thesis. Air is not for professionals. Do you want a professional computer? Buy the maximum package with M1 Max, at least M1 Pro. But let me kindly remind you that the cost of the M2 starts at $1199. M1 Air, exactly the same model, has not dropped in price, but at least it's cheaper by $200. And the SSD is better. And from that moment on, the question sticks with me. Why Apple? Despite the fact that the increase in performance is not as large as Apple claimed, and in some scenarios worse, the M2 is still quite efficient. The body of the M2 Air is clearly not designed for power-heavy tasks, and just like the M2 Pro, the M2 Air throttles. The 13-inch M1 Pro didn't throttle at all. The M1 Air dropped frequencies at about 8 minutes of interacting with it, which is also very, very good. On Cinebench 5, the peak temperature of the processor is about 105 degrees. And something tells me that these indicators are likely to affect the components more negatively than we would like, but we get what we get. And after about 15 to 20 minutes, the M2 Air of course lowers the frequencies, which allows it to cool down to 88 degrees and it keeps it at that temperature. And I have a feeling that a laptop with the M3 on board will be in a completely new body, or the Air will receive a fan and the 13-inch Pro model with the touch bar will disappear into oblivion. And I think that in most cases you won't even notice this throttling if you don't use this Mac for rendering 3D or exporting videos, but the very fact of its presence can be frustrating. And as for the rest of the tests, I know that they are not particularly informative for everyday tasks, so you can pause the video if you need them. Here are the results of all the tests that we conducted with this laptop. From personal experience, I can say that this new product from Apple is not without flaws, but I like it. It really is a breath of fresh air in terms of design. The already compact laptop has become even thinner, despite a different form factor, lighter, and comes in new finishes. Although I advise you to go for silver, I'm sure that there are people who will greatly enjoy the new colors. The return of MagSafe is good, although it doesn't make up for the necessity of third-party adapters and dongles in order to increase the number of active ports. In everyday tasks, the M2 performs as well as the M1 Air. I did not find any negatives in terms of user experience. And the most non-obvious innovation is ports. There are 2 of them here. I'm talking about the charger unit, of course. Finally, we can charge our MacBook and our iPhone from the same charger. Yes, when charging 2 devices, I managed to charge the Mac to 100% in 4 hours, and this may be long, but after so many years of anticipation, I rejoice. The laptop uses up its charge about the same as previous generations. Let's be honest, the extra 10 to 20 minutes don't make a huge difference, which means we get the same energy efficiency with A more powerful processor, and B, a lighter, thinner cases. Now that's something. So, to whom I would advise this MacBook after a week of use? Definitely not for those who need it for professional work. To be frank, even the M1 Air is not suitable for heavy, resource-intensive tasks. But I still don't think it's worth it to transition from M1 Air to M2 Air. The M1 hasn't been discontinued, you can still buy it on Apple's website for $9.99. It's even better in some scenarios, but if you're tired of the same design or planning to switch from Intel MacBook Air, then be my guest. This laptop will not only please your eyes, but also deliver satisfactory performance in everyday tasks. I'll keep this MacBook for myself. I would like to use it for a longer period of time, so soon you will see many more interesting videos starring my new friend. In the meantime, if you like this video, then go ahead and click on this one and see you in the next one.